So Ambassador Huckabee gave an interview earlier today, I think it was earlier today, maybe it was yesterday, but in which he called into question, or didn't call into question, they basically said that the administration is not particularly interested in seeking a two-state solution for the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And I want to know, I mean, he's been outspoken on this issue in the past, before he became ambassador. But is he speaking on his own, or is this now administration policy that you're no longer so interested in that kind of a resolution?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to characterize the ambassador's remarks. I'm not going to explain them or really comment on them at all. I think he certainly speaks for himself.
I know you said that the ambassador speaks for himself, but he was appointed by the president, and he does represent the U.S. government in Israel. So is a two-state solution a goal of the U.S. State Department currently?
You know, I'm not going to speak again. What I said to Matt, and what I'll keep saying, is I'm not going to parse the ambassador's remarks. That's not what I'm going to do here, and I'm also not going to speak about the nature of what people say that he was claiming or not claiming. I'm not going to have a speculative conversation about that right now. I would suggest that when it comes to the policy of the United States, that sits with President Donald Trump, and he's just he's like a 15-minute walk away from this building.
Of course, the president sets a policy, but Secretary of State is in charge of foreign policy. So irrelevant of
yes,
what
I'm not,
ambassador.
Yes, I'm not going to begin a conversation speculating based on a statement Ambassador Huckabee may or may not have made.
And I want to ask you, if there is no position of the State Department at this time, because the State Department has always...
What I said was I was not going to speak about the issue. I did not say there was no position, sir.
Okay, all right.
Be very careful, because I'm not going to have you put on the record something that is entirely not true. Now to your question, sounds like Matt Lee is amused. I hope you might be some coughing. I know you weren't laughing, and you might. It would be good to become perhaps a season ticket holder to the Kennedy Center. I'm just saying, but go ahead.
I would be happy to be a season ticket holder to Kennedy.
Yeah.
And I would love to see Les Mis, because I never saw it.
There you go.
But anyway, listen, just on your own topper, and then I want to go shoot really quickly to the Middle East, just on the top. The State Department doesn't have any role in what's going on in L.A. in terms of quelling the violence. Is that correct?
Well, as I would view it, and I think that we all know that many of the aspects regarding illegal immigration, certainly on the issue of visas, the controlling of the border, the designating of foreign terrorist organizations, is one part of a whole of government effort to keep the country safe, to keep Americans safe. Don't push me off here. I'm answering your question. And so when we see the dynamic of what's happening in Los Angeles, it is, I think, quite appropriate for Americans to see this, and it is. The nature of what we are working to do together through the Trump administration to secure this country and to secure our streets. And that means, yes, removing criminal illegal aliens and getting them back to their home countries, and certainly at least getting them off American streets so that Americans can feel safer in their own homes and in their own communities. And so in the midst of that, when we talk about it, of course, it's the State Department, it's the DOJ, it's ICE, it's the Department of Homeland Security, it is the White House. It is a multitude of departments working together to envision and implement President Trump's vision.
Okay. Let me go to the Middle East. So Ambassador Huckabee gave an interview earlier today, I think it was earlier today, maybe it was yesterday, but in which he called into question, or didn't call into question, they basically said that the administration is not particularly interested in seeking a two-state solution for the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And I want to know, I mean, he's been outspoken on this issue in the past, before he became ambassador. But is he speaking on his own, or is this now administration policy that you're no longer so interested in that kind of a resolution?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to characterize the ambassador's remarks. I'm not going to explain them or really comment on them at all. I think he certainly speaks for himself. At the same time, of course, ambassadors are there, and they're working with their host country. But when it comes to American policy and certainly where the president stands, I'd suggest you call the White House.
So,
All right. Yes, Andrea Mitchell.
Hi, thank you, Tammy. Let me ask you about part of the potential enforcement of the administration's policies to deter illegal immigration. There is reporting of a potential plan to send undocumented immigrants or others who have been detained to Guantanamo, perhaps as soon as tomorrow, while there is a court case pending to rule out Guantanamo as a place to send people, saying that it is not necessary, it is too expensive, and that the conditions are intolerable. But that this would include Europeans from allied countries countries that would willingly accept deportations of their illegal immigrants here. So what is the State Department's position on whether European illegal immigrants, migrants, who have been detained should be sent to Guantanamo rather than to their host countries, including countries that would very willingly accept them? Do you think that this would damage relationships with our allies?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that this entire dynamic, it's managed by DHS, first of all. It's certainly not a dynamic managed by the State Department. I can also say that, of course, it's not new that we are moving criminal illegal aliens to Guantanamo prior. It's not the final destination. It's prior to their being sent to their home country. But when it comes to each country, I'm not going to speak to that. But I would suggest that
I have a follow-up.
well, I won't speak to any country when it comes to the illegal aliens, the criminal aliens that may or may not be sent to Guantanamo Bay. That clearly sits within a diplomatic framework. You're asking me to speak on what the Secretary or others might be discussing with their foreign counterparts, and I'm certainly not going to do that. I'm not going to speculate, and nor will I guess or speculate on the nature of any kind of backlash or the impact on the State Department. What I can tell you is that the backlash would be as if we weren't doing our job. State Department and the Secretary has been very specific about our role, which is the vetting of people who are coming here in the first place, removing illegal aliens who are here, criminal illegal aliens, whether they've overstayed their visa, are here illegally entirely. We're very focused on the nature of what the State Department has as its charge. And this is a framework, again, that's, as I just mentioned to Matt, where you've got a whole of government framework. The DHS is in charge of this particular aspect.
But if the DHS literally would be in charge, but does the State Department have a view about what the diplomatic impact would be on our allies?
Again, Andrea, you know I'm not here to speak about the diplomatic opinion or the speculation of the nature of the feelings of things. I'm here to talk about the specifics. You're right. You know, the United States has increased enforcement of immigration laws and removal of illegal aliens. They are being removed because they didn't have a legal basis to be in the United States. These are the why, you know, the visa dynamics, the nature of that we have the right, like every country does, to control who comes in and to have an interest in who stays. And that's what this is about.
Sending people to Guantanamo might have a salutary deterrent impact. Would that help the whole of government approach which you are describing?
What I can say is that this is a very specific mission to make American streets safer. And this is why President Trump was elected, to do exactly this. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just going back to Matt's question on Huckabee's comments, I know you said that the ambassador speaks for himself, but he was appointed by the president. Mm-hmm. He does represent the U.S. government in Israel. So is a two-state solution a goal of the U.S. State Department currently?
You know, I'm not going to speak, again, what I said to Matt, and what I'll keep saying is I'm not going to parse the ambassador's remarks. That's not what I'm going to do here, and I'm also not going to speak about the nature of what people say that he was claiming or not claiming. I'm not going to have a speculative conversation about that right now. I would suggest that when it comes to the policy of the United States, that sits with President Donald Trump. And he's just he's like a 15-minute walk away from this building. call them, and in fact, I think they would have an answer for you, I would think.
Okay, and then
Of course, the president sets a policy, but Secretary of State is in charge of foreign policy. So irrelevant of
Yes,
what
I'm not.
Ambassador.
Yes, I'm not going to begin a conversation speculating based on a statement Ambassador Huckabee may or may not have made. I would suggest when we think about the policy, yes, Secretary Rubio implements President Trump's vision for foreign policy. In speaking on that issue, with everything going on in this world, we are focused clearly on the nature of the things that are in front of us. And I would just suggest calling the White House to make a determination of the Trump policy, the Trump administration's approach in this regard. So Secretary Rubio doesn't make foreign policy. It's his vision and implementation of President Trump's point of view and President Trump's vision. And so that's what Secretary Rubio does, and obviously does it very well. Yes, sir.
What's the vision that he's implementing here,
Tammy? I'm not going to begin to speculate or go into this. I'm just not going to go here. Ladies, if you want to speak about the National Security Advisor, also call the White House. Yes, sir.
Just to follow up on that issue.
Sure. And this will go ahead.
Sure, but what we have heard from the president is he wants the United States to take over Gaza. Which is obviously one of the occupied Palestinian territories and would be part of a future two-state solution. So is that, I mean, you haven't mentioned that, but should we assume that is part of the policy? And therefore that opens the question of what about the West Bank and East Jerusalem? And is that, I mean, Ambassador Huckabee seems to be suggesting there wouldn't be a future Palestinian state in those remaining areas. So we kind of know half of the answer to the question, in that you've said it's President Trump's view and decision, and he's stated that, although you haven't restated it here about Gaza. So it's just if we could clarify what.
Well, there's a focus on Gaza, and for a very good reason. And that's what we're focused on: is the ceasefire, is stopping the carnage, dealing with what's going on in Gaza. After, of course, the horrific events of October 7th, the nature of what's happening with Iran and its death squads of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, it's a full plate. And what one does is you start at the beginning and you move forward. We are still working on dealing with either certainly ceasefire and peace for Gaza, and then, of course, the aftermath of that and rebuilding and dealing with what that means. At some point in time, that will hopefully be the major conversation here, right, is in the aftermath and the rebuilding and how that's happening. And I would expect that to be a conversation that we'll all be engaging in.
But is it still the policy that the U.S. should take control of that territory?
You know,
during that process?
I can't, I don't, look, what I've heard President Trump say, and what I know the Secretary has always said, is that Hamas can't exist, that we've got to get a ceasefire, that we've got to have new ideas for making sure this doesn't happen again and again and again. I know that the President has called for new ideas to help make that happen. I know that he has had some new ideas and how to do that. We know the region has chimed in with what it believes it can do when it comes to aid and even rebuilding. But the fact of the matter is right now, Hamas won't even let the hostages go. Hamas still won't put its weapons down. Hamas is still playing games as people still die as we do work to get food and aid into that region. So we're still at that kind of dynamic, and we will get to the other part, I hope, as soon as we can. Nadia.
Thank you, Tammy. Just on the Middle East again, the Israeli Prime Minister said today there is significant progress in releasing the hostages and the ceasefire. Does the State Department share his view? And also I want to ask you about the 20 people who've been killed today around distribution center. Last briefing, I believe you said that the Israelis are investigating that. I'm just wondering how these people who have been killed daily now, not one day passes without people being killed around this food distribution center. How can they get their food safely?
Well, of course, that is exactly what we've all been working on, right, is getting food and aid safely in. We also know that the UN had a horrible dynamic where they had flour that they report was stolen by Hamas, and that the problems, and as I've said regularly, we all know it's a war zone. It's a war zone led by terrorists who don't care about humanity or the future. Regarding what's happening on the ground there, I would refer you to the IDF in Israel, which continues, of course, to investigate. And in the case of what's being led by the IDF in Israel there, I think that's where you'd need to go in that regard. And there was a third part. What was this?
Talking about the significant progress that Netanyahu is talking about today.
Yes. Well, again, I can't speak to what the Prime Minister has said.
Is he sharing anything with you, the State Department?
I can't speak to that at this point when it comes to what Netanyahu has said. Saeed, yes, and this will be the end for this particular stretch of questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very kindly.
Sure.
Just to follow up on the questions that were raised on the two-state solution and so on.
Sure.
Now, we know that President Trump in his first term came up with the deal of the century, which spoke almost in details about his vision. Let me ask you this. Now, there are 5.5 million Palestinians in between Gaza and the West Bank. And I want to ask you, if there is no position of the State Department at this time, because the State Department has always...
What I said was I was not going to speak about the issue. I did not say there was no position, sir.
Okay. All right.
Be very careful, because I'm not going to have you put on the record something that is entirely not true.
Okay.
And I want you to proceed with that in mind.
Okay, I take it back. I wanted to ask you, what do you consider the Palestinians in the West Bank? I mean,
I will not provide to you, Mike, what I consider.
Are they under occupation?
We are not going to. I will not. Look, it was nice to be able to call on you, Saeed. I'd like to be able to have a question that I can answer, but you're asking me to speculate.
Okay. Right.
I would say, I will just reiterate as we move on to another issue, is that President Trump is a man who understands and is working, really is committed these 5-6 months to being a peacemaker and to changing things that people have not been able to change for half a century. Right. And he is determined to do it. He cares about everybody. He cares about the people of Gaza. He cares about the Israelis. He cares about Jews. He cares about Christians. This is a man who genuinely is determined to make a difference as an individual. This is a very fluid situation. He wants solutions. He wants to make sure that people can live safely in the world. And we've seen him time and time again make different decisions, have consultations, talk to people nobody thinks he should talk to. He can change his mind. He's clearly transparent, speaking about what he's going through and thinking each day. So when we think about what the future will look like, it's allow us to do the work that we're doing right now, focusing on the ceasefire, getting aid into that region, and let the president, who's determined to deal with all of the issues in that region, come to the fore of what happens next, and we will learn that only from Donald Trump. All right, so is this other than the Middle East? Where else are we going? Well, no, this is going, ladies and gentlemen, no, I've said no, Saeed was it? Now, where are you coming from? Iran? All right, we'll do Iran, sure.
That's also the Middle East.
Well, we're not, Gaza and otherwise. Let's move forward, please.
There was just confusion because the two-state solution has undergirded U.S. policy for the past several decades. But I understand that is a question to address to the White House.
Yes, it's for the White House. It's for the future. I will not be commenting from this podium today. And this is, again, we've got so much more on the. Let's just move on, please. Iran?
The question on Iran is there's been conflicting messages about whether and where and when a 6th round of talks with Iran may take place. Is there clarity on that from the U.S. perspective?
I don't know if you would consider it clarity, but I can say a few things. The president, I think, he noted that something would be happening soon, this week. I think that what I can just reiterate here is that we would hope and expect that there would be new additional talks, and that, in fact, they would be soon. But beyond that, I have nothing to preview. But in similar situations, when we believe that it would be soon, it, in fact, ended up being soon.
Right. The Iranians have concretely said Sunday in Oman. So if that is not the U.S. understanding, then...
I can't comment on that. Again, the president mentioned a different day. I think that there are individuals involved, obviously, who are working on this, and there will be a final determination, and we will hear about it when that determination is made.
Okay, in that context, just very quickly.
One more follow-up, and then we'll go on.
Thank you. Well, just because the president also had mentioned that this week would be the sort of 2-month deadline for reaching a deal with Iran or not, when is it determined that those talks are a failure and, you don't progress to future
Well, the
rounds?
president makes that determination and the people involved. As I've mentioned before, if you think that think about the deadlines, or even as the secretary has said on another situation, that it would be a matter of weeks. The funny thing about negotiations and discussions is that things happen, and that there are conversations, and progress is sometimes made, not tremendous progress, but enough to keep going. So it is not. It is a dynamic, as it would be with any diplomatic consideration, that negotiations are meant to move things forward. And the good news is that, in fact, it would appear that things are moving forward, and that's what we all want. Yes. All right. Next, please. Let's get everyone in if we can here.
I'm only going to ask one to get everybody in. Sanctions question for you. The ICC sanctions that were announced last Thursday. 2 members of the pre-trial chamber that signed off on the arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, were sanctioned. But the presiding judge, the 3rd judge in the pre-trial chamber of France, was not sanctioned. What was the reasoning behind sanctioning only 2 of the 3 members and not the presiding judge of that chamber?
Yeah, again, that obviously was a internal diplomatic decision made very specifically about specific individuals, which I won't discuss.
So it was a diplomatic decision?
Well, it's what the decisions that go into the nature of when to do a sanction. Obviously, there's a combination of conversations involving national security, what's in the best interest of the United States, what's in the best interest of our diplomacy, certainly with our ally Israel, and our own national security, and the messages that we send when it comes to expecting America to be treated with respect and to be treated with some modicon of decency when it comes to the international scene. I think that makes that clear, but in the sense of the details of that, of course, I can't comment on that here.
Just while we have questions on Israel, earlier today, 5 countries...
Can you tell me, by the way, what is your outlet, just a curiosity, and your name?
Ryan Morgan with Epoch Times.
All right, hi, Ryan. Welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. So I was just wondering if you have a quick comment about the 5 countries that sanctioned Israeli ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich today.
Yes, I do. I have something for you on that, and let me get that for you. There's just so much going on today. First of all, we find that extremely unhelpful. It will do nothing to get us closer to a ceasefire in Gaza. This, again, is about Allied sanctions against Israeli ministers. They should focus on, this being UK, Canada, Norway, and New Zealand, should focus on the real culprit, which is Hamas. Hamas put the people of Gaza in this situation by launching the horrific attacks of October 7th, which killed 6 British citizens and 46 Americans, and continue to hold hostages, of course, including the bodies of 4 Americans. We remain concerned about any step that would further isolate Israel from the international community. If our allies want to help, they should focus on supporting Special Envoy Witkoff's negotiations and backing the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation when it comes to food and aid.